All right, let's dive into evolutionary epistemology.
Okay.
Today we're tackling some pretty heavy stuff.
Yeah.
We've got articles, research papers,
All right.
the whole
The
shebang,
whole 9 yards.
all to explore how
Yeah.
evolution can reshape our understanding of knowledge itself.
It's interesting how evolutionary epistemology kind of flips the script on how we typically look at knowledge.
Right.
Instead of beginning with, abstract logic or pure reason.
Yeah.
It kind of poses this question of how did we even develop the capacity for knowledge?
Yeah.
It grounds knowledge in our biological history.
It's like we're saying, all right, philosophers, you've had centuries
Yeah.
to ponder the nature of knowledge from a purely conceptual standpoint.
Exactly.
Now let's add in some Darwin.
Right, exactly.
See what happens.
And what happens is pretty incredible. Evolutionary epistemology kind of suggests that our brains, senses, and even our cognitive biases are just like any other trait. Products of natural selection, they're shaped by the need to survive and reproduce in a specific environment.
So instead of viewing our minds as these,
Yeah.
pure objective instruments for grasping truth,
Yeah.
we're saying, hold on, they come with
Yeah.
some evolutionary baggage.
Exactly. And that baggage can be both a blessing and a curse.
Right.
On one hand, these evolved cognitive mechanisms, they're incredibly efficient at processing information and making those quick judgments, which was essential for survival.
Right. Like that quick reaction to a rustle in the bushes. Like
Exactly.
that could be
Life or death.
life or death.
Yeah.
No time to sit there and ponder,
Yep.
the nature of perception.
Exactly.
Gotta go.
But those same mechanisms can lead us astray sometimes, right?
Well, yeah.
So our brains are prone to biases, prone to these shortcuts that were adaptive in certain contexts, but can distort our understanding of the world
Oh, for sure.
in other contexts.
Yeah, it's like our
Yeah.
evolved ways of knowing are like a double-edged sword.
Exactly. Powerful tools for navigating the world, but
Yeah.
they have those inherent limitations and blind spots.
Absolutely.
And recognizing those limitations is a crucial first step in understanding how knowledge itself evolves.
Okay.
And that's where the real meat of evolutionary epistemology lies.
I am hooked. Okay.
Great.
But you mentioned earlier that there are two main branches of evolutionary epistemology.
Yeah.
Can you break those down for us?
Absolutely. It's very helpful to distinguish between what we call EM,
Okay.
the evolution of epistemological mechanisms,
All right.
and then ET, the evolutionary epistemology of theories.
Okay, so EM,
Yeah.
that's all about like the nuts and bolts.
Exactly.
The biological hardware of knowing.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it.
Like how did our eyes evolve to detect light?
Right.
How did our brain develop the capacity for language?
Exactly.
That kind of thing.
EM focuses on those physical structures and processes that enable us to gather information and make sense of the world. It's about understanding how those mechanisms evolved over time.
And then ET,
Uh-huh.
that's more about like the software,
Yeah.
like the content of knowledge.
Yeah.
So how scientific theories change over time,
Right.
how cultural beliefs evolve.
Precisely. ET explores how knowledge itself,
Okay.
in its various forms, undergoes variations, selection, and transmission.
Okay.
It kind of asks us a question of why do some ideas survive and spread while others just fade away?
So EM is like the biological underpinning, and ET is the knowledge built on top of that.
That's a perfect analogy.
Okay.
Yeah, you could think of it as a kind of coevolution.
Mm-hmm.
The evolution of our cognitive mechanisms influenced the kind of knowledge we were able to acquire,
Yeah.
and then acquiring that new knowledge in turn shaped the selection pressures acting on our cognitive evolution.
Wow. So it's like this
Yeah.
intricate dance between biology and culture, with each shaping the other over time.
Exactly, and it's a dance that's still going on today. Just think about how technology is shaping our cognitive habits.
Oh, for sure.
The internet has created an entirely new niche for knowledge acquisition and sharing,
Right.
with huge implications for how we think and what we know.
Okay, hold on. Let's dive into that a bit deeper.
Right.
Because this whole idea of niche construction
Yeah.
applied to knowledge,
Yeah.
that's blowing my mind.
It's one of the most intriguing aspects of evolutionary epistemology.
Okay.
It challenges us to view knowledge not as something we passively receive, but as something we actively create and shape through our interactions with the world.
Okay, so walk me through that.
Right.
Because Niche construction, that usually refers to like, animals building nests or
Yeah.
beavers making dams.
Yeah.
How does that apply to knowledge?
Well, the principle is the same. Organisms don't just adapt to their environments, they actively modify them,
Yeah.
creating niches that in turn influence their own evolution.
Uh-huh.
And humans are masters of this, especially when it comes to knowledge.
So like all the tools and systems we've created for storing, sharing, accessing information,
Yeah.
libraries, universities, the internet,
Yes.
those are our
Those are our knowledge niches.
niches.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
And those niches have profoundly shaped how we think and what we know.
Wow.
Think about, for example, how the printing press revolutionized knowledge dissemination,
Right.
or how the internet has created this vast, interconnected web of information.
Yeah, we're not just passive consumers of knowledge.
Right.
We're active architects.
We are active architects.
Of the very environments in which knowledge evolves.
And the pace of that architectural work is accelerating.
Right.
It's fascinating to consider how our current knowledge niches,
Yeah.
especially those in the digital realm, will shape the future of knowing itself.
Okay, before we get too far ahead of ourselves,
Yeah.
let's go back to the basics for a sec.
Okay.
We've established that evolutionary epistemology offers this
Yeah.
radical new perspective on knowledge.
Uh-huh.
But a question comes up often, especially from philosophers.
Okay.
Does evolutionary epistemology tell us how we should acquire knowledge, or does it simply describe how we do?
That's a crucial distinction.
Yeah.
Evolutionary epistemology is primarily descriptive.
Yeah?
It seeks to understand how our knowledge-gaining processes actually work
Yeah.
based on their evolutionary history.
Right.
It's not about dictating what's true
Okay.
or how we should go about finding truth.
So it's more like mapping the terrain
Yes.
of our cognitive evolution
Exactly.
than like handing us a rule book for
Right.
perfect reasoning.
Exactly.
Okay.
Evolutionary epistemology helps us understand the mechanisms, the biases, the limitations that come built in with our evolved ways of knowing,
Right.
but it doesn't tell us how to overcome those limitations
Okay.
or guarantee that we'll ever arrive at some ultimate objective truth.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, there's still a lot to unpack here. We've got to delve deeper into these two flavors of evolutionary epistemology,
Yeah.
EEM and ET, and see how they play out in the real world.
Absolutely. And that's where things get even more interesting.
Right.
We'll explore how EEM sheds light on the biological foundations of knowledge,
Okay.
from the evolution of our senses to the development of language and reasoning.
Cool.
And on the EE side, we'll dive into the evolution of ideas themselves, from scientific theories to cultural beliefs,
Right.
exploring how those ideas compete, adapt, and sometimes even go extinct.
Awesome.
It's going to be a wild ride, so buckle up.
All right, dear listeners, get ready for part 2 of our evolutionary epistemology extravaganza.
Part 2.
We'll be right back after a quick, just kidding, we're diving right in.
Uh-huh.
Let's go.
Okay, so we're back and ready to...
All right, let's jump back in.
Yeah, let's delve deeper into those two branches of evolutionary epistemology.
Okay, yeah, EE and in ET.
Right.
Break them down a little bit more. I'm curious how those connect to our everyday experiences of knowing.
Absolutely. So with EM, the evolution of epistemological mechanisms, we're essentially looking at the biological evolution of our cognitive toolkit.
Okay.
It's about understanding how our brains and sensory systems became so adept at making sense of the world.
Right. It's like
Yeah,
reverse engineering the human capacity for knowledge,
exactly.
like tracing it back to its roots
Yeah.
in evolutionary history.
So imagine a philosopher from a few centuries ago trying to make sense of EM.
Right.
They'd probably be blown away by how complex the brain is.
Oh, yeah.
The intricate network of neurons
Totally.
shaped by millions of years of natural selection.
It really does challenge that idea of the mind as a blank slate, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
We're not just, born with this
Right.
abstract capacity for reason.
Yeah,
We inherit these sophisticated cognitive mechanisms
exactly.
that have been honed by evolution for specific purposes.
And those purposes weren't necessarily about discovering some ultimate truth, right?
Right.
They were about survival and reproduction.
Yeah.
Our ancestors who were better at, say, detecting predators, finding food, or navigating their social environments were more likely to pass on their genes and their cognitive adaptations.
So our ways of knowing are very much connected to
Yeah.
our evolutionary past, shaped by the challenges our ancestors faced.
Exactly, which means we can learn a lot about how our minds work, by studying the environments in which they evolved.
Okay.
So why, for example, are humans so good at recognizing patterns even when they're not really there?
I imagine like being able to spot a predator lurking in the shadows, even if
Exactly.
it turned out to be a trick of the light, would be like
Yeah.
a pretty advantageous trait.
It's better to err on the side of caution in those situations.
Right.
But that same tendency to see patterns can lead us to find meaning where there is none,
Though, yeah.
to believe in conspiracy theories, or to make snap judgments based on very limited information.
So all those cognitive biases we hear so much about,
Yeah.
those are like remnants of our evolutionary past.
Remnants of our evolutionary past.
Adaptations that served us well in some situations but trip us up in others.
Exactly. EM helps us understand where those biases come from and their functions,
Okay.
which is a valuable tool for mitigating their influence on our thinking.
So that's EEM, the biological side.
Right.
What about ET?
Okay, so ET, the
Yeah.
evolution of ideas themselves.
The evolution of ideas, yeah.
It shifts the focus from the biological hardware of knowing
Right.
to the software, the actual knowledge that we acquire and transmit.
Okay.
It's about understanding how ideas, beliefs, scientific theories,
Right.
even entire cultures evolve over time.
So if EM is about how our brains got wired for knowing,
Yeah,
ET is like what we do with that wiring.
exactly.
How we use it to build up this vast edifice of knowledge we call culture.
A brilliant way to put it. And just like biological evolution,
Yeah.
ET involves variation, selection, and transmission. Ideas compete with each other for attention,
Right.
for acceptance, for the resources they need to spread.
So it's kind of like a marketplace of ideas, right?
Yeah, it's a very powerful analogy.
Where the fittest ideas survive.
But it's important to remember that the fitness of an idea isn't always determined by its truth or accuracy.
Oh, right.
Ideas can spread for all sorts of reasons. They might be emotionally appealing,
Yeah.
easy to understand,
Uh-huh.
or simply good at self-promotion.
Oh, yeah. We see that all the time with
Right.
misinformation and conspiracy theories.
Exactly.
They tap into our emotions,
Yeah.
exploit our biases,
Right.
even if they have no basis in reality.
Exactly. ET helps us to understand those dynamics.
Okay.
Why some ideas gain traction while others,
Right.
perhaps more accurate or nuanced ones, struggle to be heard.
So it's not just about, like, survival of the fittest ideas.
Yeah.
It's about understanding the selection pressures that shape the evolution of knowledge in different contexts.
Precisely. And those selection pressures can be incredibly complex.
Right.
They can involve everything from individual psychology to social structures to technological innovations and even cultural values.
It seems like it'd be a real challenge for researchers
Yeah.
to try to model the evolution of ideas.
Right.
It's not like tracking the spread of genes in a population.
It's not a simple thing.
Ideas are, like, constantly morphing, blending, interacting with each other
Yeah.
in this vast dynamic network.
It is indeed a complex challenge, but that hasn't stopped researchers from developing very sophisticated models to study the dynamics of ET.
Okay.
They use tools from fields like population dynamics, network theory, and even evolutionary game theory
Oh, wow.
to explore how ideas spread and compete.
So are we talking like
Yeah.
mathematical equations,
Yeah.
computer simulations here?
But yeah, it can get quite technical.
I gotta admit, this is getting a little bit beyond my philosophical comfort zone.
But the underlying principles are often surprisingly intuitive.
Okay.
For example, one common approach is to model the spread of an idea as a kind of contagion,
Okay.
where individuals infect each other with their beliefs through social interactions.
So like a meme.
Exactly, like a meme that goes viral online.
It goes viral online.
Yeah.
Okay.
These models can help us understand why certain ideas spread so quickly,
Right.
why some become very entrenched in certain communities, and why others fizzle out despite our best efforts to promote them.
It's interesting to think that the same principles that govern the evolution of species
Yeah,
can also help us understand the evolution of ideas.
exactly.
Really highlights the interconnectedness of, like, everything.
It does, yeah.
Doesn't.
And it underscores the power of evolutionary thinking to illuminate phenomena far beyond just the realm of biology.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah.
We've explored EM,
Yes.
the biological evolution of our cognitive mechanism,
Explored.
and ET, the evolution of ideas.
Right.
But there's one more piece
Yeah.
that I want to dive into.
Okay.
Niche construction.
All
You
right.
touched on it earlier,
Yeah.
but I think it deserves a deeper dive.
I agree. Niche construction is really crucial for understanding how we as active agents shape the very environments in which knowledge evolves.
Okay.
It's not just about adapting to the world as we find it.
Right.
It's about actively creating the worlds we want to inhabit,
Right.
both physically and cognitively.
And that's where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
Because the world we create then feeds back into our own evolution,
Right.
shaping the selection pressures that determine which ideas survive.
It's a very dynamic co-evolutionary process
Right.
that's constantly unfolding, especially in our digital age,
Yeah.
where we're creating new knowledge niches at an unprecedented rate.
I want to explore the implications of all this
Yeah.
for our understanding of knowledge, truth, the future of knowing itself.
Then let's dive into the philosophical deep end.
All right, hang on to your hats, listeners.
Uh-huh.
Things are about to get really meta. All right, so we've gone through the biological underpinnings of knowledge with EM,
Right.
explored the evolution of ideas with ET,
Yeah.
and touched on that wild concept of niche construction.
Uh-huh.
But let's get down to it.
Okay.
What does all this mean for our understanding of truth?
That's the big question, right?
Yeah.
Evolutionary epistemology really shakes things up in the philosophy of knowledge.
Okay.
Challenges us to rethink some of our assumptions about how we get to the truth.
So does this mean there's no objective truth?
Well, hold on.
Okay.
It's not saying that
Okay.
evolutionary epistemology doesn't deny that there's an objective reality out there.
Okay.
It just suggests that our access to that reality is filtered through these evolved cognitive mechanisms.
Right. And those mechanisms, as we've said,
Right.
were shaped by survival and reproduction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Not necessarily this pure pursuit of truth.
So it's not that truth is
Yeah.
objective or arbitrary.
Right.
It's more like we're seeing truth.
It's like we're looking at truth
Yeah.
through this lens crafted by millions of years of evolution.
But that lens might not always be perfect. Our
Right.
evolutionary lens could distort things.
Yeah, think of our senses as these finely tuned instruments.
Okay.
Each one picks up on specific aspects of reality,
Right.
but not the whole picture.
Yeah.
Our brains take those sensory inputs and weave them into this coherent story, a model of the world that helps us navigate and survive.
But that model isn't always accurate.
No, our evolutionary lens might distort certain parts of reality or miss others entirely.
Like those optical illusions.
Exactly, like optical illusions.
Yeah.
They show us the gaps between what we perceive and what's actually there.
Right.
And just like our senses can be fooled,
Yeah.
so too can our higher cognitive processes.
So it's not just about our senses. It's about
It's about everything, yeah.
our thinking.
Right. Our thinking can be influenced by those biases and shortcuts
Right.
that might not always lead to accurate conclusions.
It makes me think about all those philosophical debates
Right.
about perception and the limits of human understanding.
Exactly.
It seems like evolutionary epistemology is giving us a new way to look at those old questions.
It does. It reminds us that our knowledge is always situated,
Okay.
always grounded in our specific evolutionary history
Right.
and the environments we're in.
Okay, so we talked about truth.
Yeah.
What about justification?
Okay.
If our knowledge is rooted in our evolutionary past, how do we justify our beliefs?
That's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Evolutionary epistemology makes us rethink traditional ideas of justification,
Right.
the ones based on pure logic or foundational axioms.
So we can't just rely on abstract reasoning alone.
Not entirely.
No.
Evolutionary epistemology suggests that justification is grounded in the reliability of our cognitive mechanisms.
Reliability meaning
Yeah, like how consistently our senses
Yeah. Okay.
and cognitive processes track the real world.
So if our systems are giving us information that leads to good outcomes,
Yeah,
that's a sign they're reliable.
exactly.
That's kind of a pragmatic approach, isn't it?
Yeah, you could say that.
Like the proof is in the pudding.
Right. If our beliefs lead us to make good predictions, navigate effectively, and reach our goals,
Right.
they have some justification.
But it's not foolproof.
No, our mechanisms can be fooled. We make mistakes.
Right.
Sometimes even wrong beliefs can lead to success.
Especially in the short term.
Exactly.
Right.
That's why critical thinking is so important.
Okay.
Scientific inquiry, open debate,
Yeah.
these help us refine our beliefs, challenge what we think we know, and get closer to a better understanding of the world.
So evolutionary epistemology is pushing for a more
Yeah,
grounded empirical approach to justification.
I think so.
We're not looking for absolute certainty,
Right.
but rather beliefs that are reliable that help us navigate and achieve our goals.
Exactly.
Okay, so
Yeah.
where does this leave us with the progress of knowledge?
Okay.
Does evolutionary epistemology see it as moving towards some ultimate truth?
That's a question that's caused a lot of debate.
Okay.
Some argue that while evolution doesn't promise we'll find absolute truth,
Yeah.
it does push us toward more accurate and reliable beliefs.
So it's like we're on this constant journey,
It's a journey of knowledge.
refining our understanding through trial and error,
Exact.
feedback from the environment, and talking with others.
It's a dynamic process of adaptation and refinement with no fixed endpoint.
And that's what makes it so interesting, right?
That's what makes it so exciting. There's always more to learn, more to discover, new ways to challenge what we think we know.
This has been such a fascinating deep dive.
Yeah,
We've covered so much, from the biological roots of knowledge to the evolution of ideas and how we shape our own cognitive landscapes.
It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you. Evolutionary epistemology really is a captivating field.
Yeah,
It bridges science and philosophy
in these profound ways.
in these really profound ways.
It's definitely given me a new way to think about knowledge, truth, and learning itself.
Me too.
And to all our listeners, thank you for joining us on this incredible journey into evolutionary epistemology.
Yes,
We hope it sparked your curiosity and given you some new ideas to think about.
Absolutely.
Keep those minds open. And those questions coming.
Keep asking questions.
Until next time.
See you then.